Hello, and welcome to the Tavern Chat podcast. I'm your host, Eric Tenkar, your bartender in the OSR, and this is another in our series of designers and makers fireside chats. Why a fireside chat? Because, except for the initial questions, we don't have rails. We go where we want to go, and it's much less formal than an interview. Today, I have Tyson from Smunchy Games. Welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you for joining us. I have really gotten to enjoy doing these chats with people because I really get to not only meet members of the community, but get to share those members of the community at large on the podcast and sometimes even on the blog side. So again, thank you for joining us.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to hit you with a couple of questions. It's about your gaming experiences. To kind of ground you and ground our audience in your background. So the first question should be an obvious one, but tell us about your first RPG experience.
So I've listened to your show and I had to think about what my first one was a little bit. And it took me back to my childhood. And I realized that my first experience was really, I had a couple of friends and we weren't necessarily the most popular kids in school, but we would hang out on the weekends and after schools and just create our own worlds. And we knew about D&D, but none of us could afford any form of like a guidebook or any of the dice or anything. So we decided, you know what, we're just going to make our own Dungeons and Dragons campaign, and we had no idea how to structure it or how to do it at all. And so we just decided, okay, we're going to make stuff up and we're just going to tell a story. We had one guy who was our DM, and he would go in and just create these worlds for us. And it was just basically a choose your own adventure style where we were like, okay, you approach this door, what do you do? And so we didn't have roles for initiative. We didn't have roles for any type of anything. And so it was just kind of a free-for-all narrative, and it was brought me into the point that we started finding programs online to make RPGs, and we had an RPG maker system that was just preformed that would create stuff. So we played them on our computers as well as after that, so that we could transition into a little bit more formal structure.
Well, that's pretty cool. I've talked to people who came in with a mishmash of rules, nobody understanding how to play it, but you guys didn't even have the rules and instinctively knew how to play it. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, we didn't. I mean, you're giving us a little bit too much credit. We really were just messing around, and we thought we knew what we were doing. If anybody truly engaged in any form of GMing saw what we were doing, they probably would have been horrified.
But you know what? That is still, it's that group experience that brings you into the hobby. And however it does, listen, when we were all younger, we played cops and robbers, cowboys and Indians. You always had to argue over who got shot.
Yeah.
At least you had a GM to make those decisions.
Yeah, exactly.
So you guys were ahead of the game.
Okay, it made us feel pretty good.
It should make you feel pretty good now. All right. What is your go-to RPG system and why?
So I haven't had a whole ton of experience with a ton of different RPG systems, and so D&D 5th edition is really my go-to. It's the only one that I've ever been able to create any real characters through. It's the only one that I've ever done anything significant in, outside of making up my own systems and making up my own experiences. So D&D 5th edition would be my go-to, and I know that's kind of Cult of the Newish. That's not. I don't have the rich history that is D&D.
Listen, a lot of people don't have that rich history, but they have the passion. And really, if you're creating and you're a creator, you have the passion. So you've been bitten by the bug.
That's absolutely the truth. I can't tell you how interesting the concept of like creating these systems and creating the experiences for players to be able to get to play within the worlds that you create is just so satisfying.
Cool. All right, so this next question might not be applicable, but we'll throw it out there anyway. Because you probably haven't played anything like Basic or any of the other older versions of D&D, but uh, one of the things they had in Basic was the races such as Dwarf and Elf were actual classes. You couldn't be a Dwarven cleric, you were just a dwarf, even though you were pretty much like a fighter. Do you prefer to have like what 5e has, which is you choose your race and you choose your class, or do you like them as a package that's already predefined?
So it depends on what I'm doing, but I would probably go with I like the versatility of having the choice to create a class and a race because I think it gives you more options. But then it depends on who I'm playing with and what the campaign is, right? Because if you have that package deal, it really just you're beholden to what's going on in those systems in the way that they're working, and I really enjoy that to a degree. But I love the sandbox nature of having multiple options and multiple choices.
Yeah, that's kind of like where I stand. I mean, I actually I don't mind racist class if it's built into the setting. If it is what always what I found disconcerting was that okay, the player characters are stuck being a straight up dwarf, but the dwarven non-player characters, you could have a dwarven non-player character healer. You could
Yeah,
have an elven thief that was a non-player character, but the players couldn't do it. I never liked that. Didn't like the idea that you were limiting what a player could do, but not what the background. But the background characters didn't have that. See, that was always my issue. So
yeah. I'm a huge fan of having that choice and being able to take the situation and make what of it you will, because I think that it creates rich kind of stories and rich kind of experiences and the kind of memories you get to go back to, and I really love that.
very good. All right. So now, where do you stand on save or die? We're not talking the podcast. We're talking about the idea that failing your saving throw can flat out kill your character, no matter how powerful or how weak.
Yeah, I love there's the idea of you have that threat of permanency, and I love the idea that you can die, like it's finite, so the stakes are high, and I love that having the stakes high. And because what's the point of me playing personally if there isn't some consequence to the actions? I could just go do whatever I wanted, right?
Right. So it kind of puts a little uh, balance into it.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Now, what would the younger you think if they could see what you would accomplish in the hobby at this point in your life?
I So the younger me was all about writing stories. I remember writing a bunch of different books and things like that, and imagining what it would be like to be a published author or a storyteller or something in that space. I would have never imagined having the ability to have the option to have any sort of anything published within a game creation standpoint. And so I, I think just awestruck. I think that to even have the potential to have something there would just kind of floor me as a kid. And then if my younger self could even play any of the stuff that I've dealt with and created, I, I think it would just be like this is amazing. I can't believe I'm going to do this kind of thing. And yeah, I think awestruck is the right term.
And see, that's the first answer I've gotten in all these sit downs that actually sounds like the answer I would have to give because I feel the same way. And uh, during high school, I was writing stories, I was writing fantasy poetry, and I was trying to design my own games. Enough that I would actually show my parents what I was pitching. It was like my elevator pitch to my parents about a modular, what's a modular, like built on index cards RPG dungeon that you could, lay out. And now here I am, 51 years youngish, and I'd be floored to know that I have a 4-page rule set that thousands of copies have been distributed, uh, and that people play it at conventions. And I've had a blog that's been around for 9+ years, and I'm doing these sit downs and fireside chats. Never would have believed it if I was younger. I wouldn't have believed it 10 years ago, to tell you the truth. But
I would have believed. I mean, and the fact that you have thousands distributed and playing at conventions consistently is a huge deal. I wouldn't believe that I could even get 15, 20, 30 different people to play my stuff, and that still just blows my mind that anybody has any form of appreciation for anything that I've ever created.
well, I think that, I mean, I was told when I had the idea for Swords and Wizardry Light, which I didn't call that at that point, that I wasn't looking far enough. My vision was too small. Apparently, people have said that were right, but I looked at some of your releases, and you've got a nice stable of releases out there. That's
Yes.
something you should be proud about, because, to be honest with you, a good portion of our hobby is smaller third-party publishers that are one and done.
Right.
And to be consistent and have a professionalism to it, that's something that you can't sneeze at. So, I mean, talk to us. Tell me.
Yeah. No, that one and done mentality is just something that is not something that I feel I can stick to. Like, I get the idea of somebody being like, I want to one day write a book. I want to one
Right.
day do this one thing. And once I've done that, I've checked it off my bucket list. I caught this sort of bug that no matter how much I do, like, I've designed a ton of different games that are never going to see the light of day. And that's okay. But everything that I have done has led me to the next thing. And the next thing ends up being ultimately better than the last thing. And I just, for whatever reason, can't stop that momentum. Like, I can't stop thinking about designs. I can't stop thinking about creating worlds and creating experiences. And I can't, it just continues to move. And so that one and done mentality just is hard for me to personally identify with, because I love everything that it does. And I love creating a space in which somebody can experience something new and experience something that is rewarding and creates moments and memories and something that you can go back to. Like, even for my childhood, having that friend who created these different worlds that they're never going to see the light of day, but I've paid homage to some of the stuff that we've done by naming planets, naming different cities or whatever, as specific things within those are my historical background, because of, like you said, that kid in me would just be amazed to see that the name of my first character that I ever created, Callisto, would be in a game or anything like that. Just like I just want to create more and more and create those experiences and moments for other people because of how impactful they've been in my own life.
Damn. Well, what was your first published work?
So my first published work is going to be with Smunchy Games, and it's called Path's Temple of Ukroka. I've got a couple of other games all in the line going to be published right now, but the first one will be Path's Temple of Ukroka. And that game is essentially a dungeon crawl. It's a board game, but it's a dungeon crawl taking place in the universe of the Paths RPG system. And so we're trying to take a specific area within Path's world of idea and create a kind of isolated single box GM in a box kind of experience. So you don't have to have a GM, you can just play the game and it runs for you, but it gives you the same feelings of creating and developing and honing your character.
Wow. All right. Well, that's something to look forward to. What is the ETA on that?
So that is coming out third or fourth quarter this year. So end of 2019 is what we're shooting for. We've had a lot of good feedback with it. We recently tested it with a group that I run called the Gamesmiths, and I snuck it in with them. They didn't know I designed it, and so I made it alias. I created this whole facade that they wouldn't know it was mine. And when we played it, they ended up telling me that it was that they would buy it instantly, like, and they were excited to play the game because of the experiences that it creates. Because it creates that kind of RPG kind of a feel to it without having to worry about a DM. So in the groups that everybody wants to participate in, and I don't know how many times you've run across the type of groups that they're like, well, I don't want to be the GM. I know that there are certain people that love to be a GM, but not everybody does, right? And so I wanted to create an experience that people could do that and just play it with whomever, and it will tell you and go through this dungeon and create these experiences and this mini campaign that will be fulfilling and rewarding in that way.
Now, I've seen probably 2 or 3 games, not quite like that, but trying to touch on that. A fantasy board game trying to replicate the dungeon on Kickstarter, and I've seen failures because either they set their goals too high, or they were unable to successfully pitch the game because it was more concept than reality as we were trying to fund. Sounds like you're going to have pretty much a written, ready to go game when this releases. I mean, are you going to kickstart it, or are you going to go with some other kind of funding?
Yeah, so we'll be doing Kickstarter, and you're exactly right. I think that one of the issues with a lot of games that go on Kickstarter like that is the problem of focusing on the mechanism side of things too much and not enough on the lore and the history and the development of that kind of world. And fortunately, I've been working with Sean Fallon, who founded Smunchy Games, and he is a huge world builder. He's created over 15 years this world of Adia with all of these different races and all of these different nuanced cultures and things like that. And so because of that, I think this game has the potential to stand out above others because he was able to focus on this lore and this development of rich characters and rich story and background. And then we were able to take that and apply it to this game. And I focused on the mechanism side of things and making sure that it worked. So we both have these kind of perspectives and then put them together to create this whole. And I think that that's where it has the chance to stand above others because Sean's dedication and his love for creating rich experiences out of story and narrative is just bar none the best that I've seen out of any sort of like indie designer or publisher or anybody who's created anything on the smaller side. I mean, it has the chance to become something bigger than it is right now, but you don't get to a Games Workshop, you don't get to a Gary Gygax status without having that starting point. And I think Sean's got a lot of that with the rich story and history he's put into his stories.
Nice. Now, what kind of like gameplay length? Like when you sit down with this, how long is it going to take the average group to get through a dungeon or a session?
So each session the goal is to go between about 1 to 2 hours. So you can sit down in 1 to 2 hours and have a full experience. And that's one scenario. And then an entire campaign, because they're going to be mini campaigns, they're going to be 3 scenarios. And those 3 scenarios will tell this story of what's going on within this temple and hopefully help people get in touch with these characters who have already been created within this RPG system, within this world, and get to understand a little bit more about them and who they are.
Well, it sounds like it's going to also be a pretty good way to transition like Euro gamers, people that play a lot of the Euro board games like Ticket to Ride and Carcassonne,
Right.
and transition them to RPGs. That's actually pretty interesting.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the goal. We're seeing in some of the board game stuff that there is a transition towards theme and towards story that hasn't always been present, and you're seeing some of those Euro style mechanics get embedded into these more story based games. And we feel that as you do that, you have the potential of creating people who are more invested in not only the gameplay but the whole experience in and of itself. Because games like Ticket to Ride or Carcassonne or any other Euro style game, they have a shelf life. But like an RPG, the same group, how many groups have you heard that have been playing the same RPG for 10, 15, 20 years, and they're still doing the same campaign essentially? And the only way I can see to kind of merge the two audiences is give them a little bit of both of what they want, and then once they get that taste, they get to move into that whole kind of rich lore, history, experiential narrative that is an RPG.
Now, are there going to? Well, actually, I'm asking a question, but I think I already know the answer. But for the audience, are there going to be expansions to this that are planned? Because it sure sounds like you could certainly build upon the initial release. Because if you're going to make a campaign, I don't know if you can fit it all in one box.
Right. We're doing 3 mini campaigns in the box, so you're going to get 9 scenarios in the box to go off of. And then ideally, what I'd like to do is create kind of a guideline of here's how you can go about using the stuff in this box to continue creating more stories within it. So people can take it and build their own scenarios and do their own world building with what it comes with. And then on top of that, absolutely, we want to create more expansions for this game, but ultimately that depends on the success of the game, because we don't want to front load it and then say that some of this stuff never gets seen. However, there is an enormous amount of history to this game. Like I said, 15 years worth, that this game could go beyond the confines of this temple of Ukruka, this small location within the world. It could be embraced, and we could go all over the entire continent, and there's so much that could be explored within this system.
So now, with the past RPG and then the past Temple of Ukruka, if I got that right.
You did.
Okay. How much synergy is going to be between the two when like the past RPG releases?
Yes, that is a great question. We've got a couple of teams. So we've got the team that's working on Ukruka, and then we've got the team that's working on the RPG specifically. And lately, we've been working together. We've got one of us from each team kind of overlapping and making sure that all of our information is working. So we've got different classes. We've got a mage, a paladin, a warrior, necromancer, a priest, and a beastmaster currently in the board game. And we're making sure that all of the functions, all of the spells, all of the different attacks and things like that are overlapping, and making sure that there is a lot of synergy built between these two systems, so that if you are starting into the RPG and you want to try the board game, you will recognize that teleport does the same thing in both the board game as it does in the RPG, or an attack of like the gavel smash does the same type of thing. So we're trying to make sure that there is synergy, so that it's not just like, okay, they share a name. We want them to share more. We want them to share the entire experience in both.
Well, that would certainly make the transition from being brought over from Eurogaming, or just tabletop games and in general regular board games, to the Temple. and then using the temple to introduce people to RPGs, and then having an RPG system that isn't going to feel foreign to them
Yeah.
is a certainly nice way to bring them in.
Yeah, at Smunchy Games, we have a philosophy about transmedia production. We're not just there to create one little thing. We're there to create the experience. So if it's going to be a board game, if it's going to be an RPG, if it's going to be a book, a video game, what have you, it's going to share the same lifeline, and it's going to take the same attention to detail across one to the other, so that you can know that if you're playing a Smunchy game or you're reading a Smunchy product, you know that you're going to get the same narrative experience, where you're going to develop more of an understanding of the world that is Adia, and then just add it to anything, whether or not you're playing the RPG. After playing the board game, you know how to better integrate what you're doing into your narratives, into your own campaigns and things like that.
So now, aside from the past RPG and the past board game, what are there any other projects that are in store? I'm assuming down the line, but yes. All right, cool.
What? There is. There's one actively being built out as well, called the Rift Shifters IP. So it's Rift Shifters, and there's a number of different games being developed. We're doing a war game with that one, and an RPG system with that one as well. And that's a sci-fi world. So if you're not into the fantasy style of play, this one is what is going to attach you to a more sci-fi driven world, where you have space combat, you have space exploration, and you have different grittier feels. Essentially, what Rift Shifters is it's a world in which you have multiple timelines, and you have multiple parallel universes that are working together, and these worlds are connected through rifts. These rifts are controlled by one faction called Kron, that are trying to take over basically all of life that is in existence in any universe. And so with Kron, they're opposed by another faction called Origin, that are actively grabbing different races and different individuals to try and build up a resistance against Kron's overall domination. And so there's a lot of this rich history around that as well. And we've got different races that we're building out in that, and different experiences in general. And so we've got a couple of games in store for that one, and another RPG system, which I believe, and I could be wrong on this, but is going to lean heavily on the Fate system.
Okay.
But there are different approaches that may handle that one as well, as opposed to the World of Adia, which is a completely unique RPG system of its own creation, and has the potential to be played solo.
Well, that's actually a pretty good potential for a lot of players. I mean, even me, I live in New York City, but to find a face-to-face group is a real pain in the ass. So most of my gaming has been done either at VTTs or running stuff at conventions. So,
yeah, and that's exactly what we've found, is that we want to embrace every type of gamer. We want to make sure that gamers are experiencing what they could, whether or not they have the group too. Because that was one of my personal experiences, that I was very much interested in playing games, and I just couldn't find the groups to play it with, or playing RPGs, or doing any type of gaming at all. And when you don't have that group, and you just end up reading and immersing yourself in that lore, you just want to experience it. And so we wanted to create a way that anybody at any point in time could do that. And so the RPG team has been working really hard on getting a really good solo system that allows you to play the game without having to have the group, if you're in that situation, or if you prefer that.
Right, and I guess if you don't need a GM, you can run that game. Instead of going one-on-one, you can actually do two and have the game engine run you through it.
Exactly.
That's pretty good. So now, for past RPG? I'm guessing that we're looking somewhere in 2020, 2021.
That is actually comes before the board game.
Oh, it does.
It comes out April 23rd on Kickstarter.
Oh, okay. Well, you know you're gonna have to ping me, right? And remind me. So
yeah, absolutely. We definitely will. I know that the RPG team is eagerly working on that and putting together all the stuff. They're frantically going together and trying to make sure that every little detail is right, because there's so much into the system, and working on making sure that that solo adventure that will be released, the first one that will be released, is as good as it can be, so that everybody can get the full experience they can out of it.
cool. Now, is this going to be distributed through drive-through, or are you doing offset printing, or?
So there's going to be digital copies as well as physical copies available. We are actually going, I believe, through Titus Media.
Okay.
They're a publishing house. They published the first book in the first novella that was published through Smunchy Games, called A War Drum of Death, that focuses on a lot of the different races and what's going on in India, the current climate, and things like that.
Ooh. Is that available in PDF anywhere, or Kindle,
That's available on Kindle, the Amazon store. You can get it through any major retailer. It's in Barnes and Noble, etc. So you can get it basically your preferred retailer. You can find it usually. It hasn't necessarily gone into the mom and pop shops yet, but it's still available online in most retailers.
See, and if you have a bookstore that's actually a physical presence by you, God bless. I don't. The two Barnes and Nobles that were relatively close to me closed up in the last 2 or 3 years. So
I've been so sad to hear that, because I remember going into Barnes and Noble as a kid, just going and spending time there, looking for books, looking for stories, looking for experiences, and just spending time after school there. And I know they're struggling. I was listening to a game podcast recently that was talking about how the Barnes and Nobles is shifting their goals to not only focus on on books, but they're starting to put board games more and more in their stores, and start to hopefully run different events so that they can create the kind of environment that really fosters the creative and rich histories that are available through books and different mediums.
yeah, well, I think Barnes and Noble always had the culture of take a book off the shelf, plop your ass on the floor, and read it. Which I don't know how much of a fostering of actually selling books that was. But if you bring people into your store because they're going to play a game, it is quite likely that they're going to leave with something afterwards, or if they enjoyed that game and never played it before, maybe want to take it home. That's a very good idea for them. So it makes a lot more sense than, pop and squat in the corner and read the latest graphic novel, then put it back dog eared that nobody's going to buy it.
Yeah, exactly. And from what I understand, while their book sales are declining, their games are increasing. Like, the sales of all their games have increased, and so they're in the black with the games, but the books are kind of in the red right now. So trying to find that happy medium, I think.
Well, yeah, I think. Listen, a piece of fiction. I think it's easier to buy fiction online because you're following usually an author or a genre, and you really can't learn much about the book by flipping through a few pages. But gaming books, like role-playing game books especially, or even board games where you look at the back of the box to see what the layout looks like and read the description, I think that's more a physical, tangible aspect. Do I shop online on Amazon for stuff? Of course. But if I had a bookstore to go to, I'd be there, because I like that physical, tangible for things like RPGs and board games. So
yeah, I think where everything else is going on trying to be purchased through the internet, or your experiences are happening online more. Even this chat we're having connects us across the country. We're able to chat, we're having experiences like that. The real strength of a place like Barnes and Noble or any other brick and mortar is where they can create those experiences in those groups and bring people together. And so unless they're doing those types of experiences that create and help people come together, I wonder how effective the other means are being when you have something like Amazon or when you have different retailers online.
Yeah, like Amazon, you might save money, but if Barnes and Noble or a mom and pop can give you the feeling of community, a feeling like you belong, that you recognize other shoppers to the point where you say hello. Oh, what are you buying today, or what are you looking at? That's something that they'd have to embrace, because that's the only thing that's they can't compete on price. Brick and mortar rarely can,
Right.
but you got to offer something more, and it doesn't necessarily have to be overpriced coffee and scones. It can be community.
And I think that leads, when you develop that community, it leads the people to purchase those overpriced coffees and scones, right?
Oh, definitely. That's the reason why, Barnes and Noble used to be a Starbucks attached to it, but before they closed by me, Starbucks became like a Barnes and Noble cafe or whatever it was, because they, obviously you keep more of the money as if it's your own.
Right.
And I think Borders did the same thing.
But yeah, they're recognizing that without developing those communities, what's keeping the people sticking around, right? Where we were talking about how it used to be you could go plop yourself down at Barnes and Noble and read and get your stuff out. You could spend your time there with your friends or whatever. That community seems to be less and less, where you can develop it digitally with like-minded people as well.
True. And I think that with anything in competition with was that the big boys, places like Amazon, the online market, or social media, any of that stuff. If you are smaller, you have to offer something different, or if you're competing against something like that, and community is usually where it will make or break you, because that community gives you repeat customers or return patrons. And they bring in others. Without that, you're missing out on a lot. It's the only thing that a brick and mortar presence or something like that, or even like something like Discord, can offer a more immediate sense of community than Facebook, where you're replying to somebody's message 2 days later.
Yeah, and I can't tell you how many times I've walked into my local game store and seen a group of people playing an RPG or a board game and just having a great time. And unless the game store itself creates a function in which allows you to walk up and join a group, it's not nearly as successful, because you don't feel that connection to that community unless they offer a means to do that. If a group just decides, oh, this is where we're going to run our RPG, that's not necessarily community to everybody else, but it starts to develop the atmosphere. So I love when a store can create and say, okay, this is RPG night. If you've never played, we're going to create your characters here. We're going to walk you through the whole customization process. We're going to go through everything, and we're going to teach you what you need to know. So if you've ever had any desire to do it, here's how to do it. And that, I love that type of thing, because it creates that community that you wouldn't be able to get from going to a Target or a Walmart or whatever else.
Right. And that is, one of my fellow podcasters and my co-host on Wednesday nights at the Discord server, Glenn Hallstrom. He does a lot of in-store demos of Swords and Wizardry, and it's open tables, which is great. Now, I played in an AD&D campaign, and then ran a Swords and Wizardry campaign with the same group at a game store out in Long Island, and the game store was great, and they did fine by us, but it was like every table was its own little clique. Everybody was by themselves. Nobody was interacting. Maybe somebody walked by you on the way to the bathroom and looked at what you guys were doing, but nobody was going to sit
Right.
down with you. You weren't bringing people into the game. And I think bringing people into the game, no matter what the game is, into gaming in general, is important to the hobby in general. A rising tide lifts all ships. 5e was great for us, but it doesn't mean everybody else can't do their own part to raising that tide.
Right, and that's exactly my mentality with it as well. I used to run demos at a local store as well, and I loved being able to sit down, put my sign up saying free demos, and then engage with anybody who was like, "Hey, I want to play a game," and I loved doing that because it created it. But if I ever went into a store and that wasn't in existence, I almost inevitably left feeling like I wanted more. There was a lot there that I liked, but I'm not going to pick off a game off the shelf necessarily, uh, and just up and buy it unless I know a little bit more about it. So if somebody's there to teach it to me and show me the ropes, I love it. And then I develop a friend. I've met a number of designers. I've met a number of players through going to my local game store, and then I've developed really strong relationships because they invited me to play or they asked me about what I was doing. They engaged with me, and that's the kind of atmosphere that I think the physical brick and mortars can really offer. And if they focus on that, it really helps, like you say, lift our hobby into one that is more inclusive and more happy to help and support everybody in having the shared experiences that these amazing worlds and stories can give us.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, the worst thing is to walk into a hobby store and there's 6 games going, and these are all groups that aren't adding. They're not demos. They're not looking to add players. This is where they meet, and now you're trying to walk amongst this to maybe shop a shelf or something. It's you almost feel like you're imposing, and
Yeah.
that's never a good feeling. But when you have the open tables, like, hey, come on over, look, take a look at this board game. You want to just plop in. So and so is playing. Take over their spot. That brings you in, even if you only sit down for 20 minutes just to get a feel for it. That is part of the experience of learning about games and finding a community, at least in a physical space, I think.
Yeah. And that's what I love about the hobby is that it creates community if it's done right. And I love the relationships I've developed with different people through it. And I mean, interacting with people, whether it's physically or online, interacting with people in something that you share a passion for is such a rewarding experience.
Yeah, it certainly is, and I'm very blessed that I have more time to be part of the hobby that I am passionate about and love being a part of. It's a blessing. So,
I wholeheartedly agree.
well, folks, I think on that note, we have found our way to the end of the dungeon. We've we've actually accomplished the temple of Uruka 2 quarters ahead of time. No, but we certainly covered a wide amount of space. And Tyson, again, when is the Pass RPG kicking off on Kickstarter?
Should be there April 23rd.
April 23rd. All right, folks, I'll give it a mention again on the podcast as we get closer. Certainly be mentioned on the blog as it releases. I want to thank Tyson from Smunchy Games for joining us tonight.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's been a blast. I've really enjoyed the conversation.
Well, again, thank you. I as much as I find the RPG interesting, I'm more excited about the RPG board game hybrid, and I think that's something that my niece will jump into 2 feet right into the deep water. She's 8 and she's already building her own dungeons using Dwarvenite and other 3D terrain.
I love that. That's exactly when I was starting doing all that. So I am a big advocate of that.
Yeah, she kind of misleads her classmates because she tells her classmates that her uncle writes RPGs and games. Her uncle writes games, actually, is what she says, and they think that I'm like a video game writer. So she's
Oh.
really, really cool, and she doesn't really tell them it's RPGs. And I'm like, you gotta tell them it at some point. She's like, no, it's better this way. Okay, you're right. You guess you know best.
She's a salesman at heart. She knows how to drag them in and then go for the close.
Oh my God, when she was, I guess 6 when Swords and Wizardry Continue of Light, when I expanded those 4 rules and published it to like 16 rules, and we covered 7 levels, and I showed it to her because I was proud, and I was watching her one day, and she had the physical copy, and she's looking at it, and then she goes running up to my wife, and she's like, Auntie, this cover sells. I was like, where the hell did you get that from, kid? They are amazing at that age. Well, again, folks, thanks to Tyson for joining us. Thanks to all you for listening. As always, stay safe, be well, God bless. Roll those dice as you need them. And I will talk with you all tomorrow. Later, folks. And of course, it won't leave. I don't know why Craig won't leave. I'm going to have to trim this one. Gosh darn it, what the hell happened with my Craig? This is hilarious. I'm trying to get the damn thing to leave. I've got the command posted in, and the damn bot won't leave. I really am tempted to leave this in. Oh, I can't even. Why the heck can't I even? Bex, I can't even get Craig to leave because it won't. I can't even delete what I initially pasted in there. What the bloody heck? Well, in any case, I'll find a way to trim this, or it's just going to be a really awesome, funny episode where people go, "What the hell happens at the end there?" Yeah, Craig won't leave. Go figure that one out. I can't even properly interact with that box. Well, in any case, Tyson, thank you.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. I really, really did enjoy chatting with you. I think that I loved learning more about everything with Tenkar and your whole podcast, and it was a blast. Thanks.
You're very welcome. And I'll figure out how to get this damn bot to stop recording.
Well, good luck.
Thank you, man.
All right. Have a good night.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Why the hell won't it just shut down? This is hilarious. That's hilarious, I tell you. I wonder if I close out and I wonder if I leave the room. Will it still record nothing? Well, actually, what I gotta do, maybe I gotta. This is ridiculous. Ridiculous. Craig won't leave, and I can't.